Welcome to the Marketing Millennials, the No BS Marketing Podcast. I'm Daniel Murray, and join me for unfiltered conversations with the brains behind marketing's coolest companies. The one request I tell our guests, stories or it didn't happen. Get ready to turn the up.
What is up, Hugh? Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Daniel.
I want you to give a little intro of like who you are. How did you get into the social media space? How did you found the company that you founded? Let's get into the quick story behind it.
Sweet. So I run Sked Social. We're a sort of social media scheduling analytics, creative management, I guess, platform. Started 2013, 14, long time ago. The software company. Before that, I was in management consulting and I guess really helping brands get into digital comms. Again, those were the probably earlier days of social that some will remember, but it feels like every day I'm older and older and no one remembers the old days of forums and communities and things like that to the same degree that they were. And actually before that, I was a medical student. So I actually ended up somehow weirdly in comms and marketing and things like that. Out of initially studying medicine, although my mother will tell me I never actually finished any of my degrees. So, serial dropout.
That's a funny. My wife always, her line is that she's a law school dropout because she was going to be a lawyer and then decided to get into e-commerce. So, quite a pivot. So
it's good many years on hearing all of your ex-colleagues tell you that the grass is definitely greener where you are now. So.
I bet. People think marketing's not a real job until they get into these other grinding professions, which marketing is grind too. But I want to get into social media. Like you said, you've seen it from 2013 and now 2025. What are like the big shifts from early days social to now what social is today?
So I started Sked really around, and it was called Schedugram back in those days. But was really around Instagram. And that was really because back in that sort of 2013, 14 day, I guess you could say that, that Instagram was still on its sort of its trajectory up, right? And there was still this sort of debate of, who's gonna win and what does this mean? And, Snapchat was still emerging and stuff like that. And I think we saw for social media managers and on the marketing side, we saw this big shift. I guess, Sked was lucky to sort of be along with that shift of suddenly we went from sort of content that was very sort of, the text and links days of social into this sort of, visual first piece, like if you remember the old Instagram days of where everything was like, you had your hipstermatic photos and like the filters were like, off the charts. And I think it changed the nature of what it is to actually work in the marketing side of social media marketing and digital. Like it used to be that you were very much a sort of what you'd call now, I guess, a pure content person. Whereas increasingly sort of, I guess, that world of suddenly you're also a video editor, suddenly you're also a graphic, designer, like all of those things suddenly became a bigger part of the repertoire that before then, I think, it was very much more around that community management side, community building side. And I think one of the things that fell off as a result of that was a lot of those sort of, I guess, original OG community management, how do we actually engage with people elements kind of disappeared, and I think sort of the job got so lost in suddenly having to do all of these other things, that sort of core piece in some ways of like, how do we actually get people into the tent and how do we actually engage them and connect them with each other became less and less important.
It's crazy. I do remember those days where you would just swipe through and find the perfect filter on your photo and you just posted it. And then you went to the next phase was let's post these highly posed, filtered outside of the app photos. Now it's whatever device you have, you could do whatever you want for posting, but you have to now learn how to make great cuts, make great edits, make sure the job got harder and harder for people in brands, which is why the problem you're solving and you're working to keep solving. So now the era of social right now of you alluded to people forgot the community element of social. Why do you think it's gotten more and more important to have that component? And what are some ways that people can?
Yeah, like it's a good question, and I think why are we missing? I don't know. I don't know why I think it's that important, right? You know, some people could say, well, you know, if people just want to yell into the void, then they can just yell into the void, and good for them, you know. Or maybe communities are fine if they just live in the sort of outer reaches of the internet, you know, the corners of Reddit and I don't know, threads on X or Blue Sky or something. I think there's that piece of, you know, the way that we sort of envisioned or I guess designed these platforms was the connection side, right? And I think the way that we should be using them as marketers, and you know, yes, I am talking here from a brand sense, but I think, you know, you see the same thing with a lot of the influencers and, you know, I guess other brands in that sense of not necessarily just purely businesses, is that piece of how you connect and how you actually engage with other people. How can we get it back? I don't know. I think a lot of the time, like, I think part of what's happened is that a lot of brands are too scared to actually, you know, like sort of, I guess, take the risk of, you know, kind of having a little bit less of that sort of brand custodianship, you know, like on that influencer sense, for example, like, you know, we have all these arguments about like authenticity online and things like that. And I sort of go, well, the reason we have all those arguments is because we've set this community expectation that everything is this sort of on brand and polished and beautiful thing. You know, sometimes it feels, you know, you sort of go to a brand's content and you may as well be scrolling their, you know, Facebook ad catalog, you know, and it's sort of like there's no real differentiation between what might be organic content and paid content, because they see it as this like, oh, we've got to, you know, the brand has to be presented right. And, you know, that, but I think the more and more you sort of try and put so much polish on things like that, the harder it gets to actually, you know, sort of get among it. But I think, because you just run out of time. But I think secondly, you know, you actually lose the ability to, you know, really properly see some of the, you know, like the heyday of organic social was the piece of like, you know, you saw the behind the curtain, you know, feelings of what it was. And that was the organic experience of, you know, of social for a lot of those things.
And I think, I mean, back then, I would say 80% of all engagement came in the feed, and now 80% of all engagement are stories and DMs. So if 80% of engagement are stories and DMs, that means that the community aspect is what people want, at least in Instagram, for example, because you have stories where people are like replying, polling, all that good stuff. And it's a quicker view on someone's life versus getting lost in the feed where it gets served intent-based content. And then DMs is where people are sharing your content to everybody. And now they have broadcast channels too, which is technically like another DMing thing in the app. So if 80% are now in DMs and stories, that signals that like people are using it to create their own communities, whether it's with their friends or with colleagues or whoever. So brands should also be thinking about that, but it seems like they're still thinking back in what you said, early 2019, maybe 2018, how Instagram worked then.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to keep up with those things. Like one of the things that, you know, that there are sort of, we've always had those sort of flash in the pan moments as social media people of, you know, channels that appear and then sort of disappear again. You know, like someone was reminiscing with something about the Clubhouse days, right? Where for a while everyone was suddenly about, oh my God, you know, audio is the future, and these sort of drop-in audio chats was the future of everything. And that's pretty much disappeared now, right? And I think, you know, one of the things that, you know, we've certainly seen is that while all those, you know, a lot of those things you said, like broadcast channels and things like that, like in the past, you would think that they would be these, you know, sort of new social channels, and they would be these, you know, new places, and everyone would be sort of chatting about how we could use all these things, and even Be Real, I guess, briefly had its moment, right? But like it's actually all just re-centralized back into, you know, yes, you've got, you know, shorts and, you know, TikTok, and that I guess is a different format in the sense of, you know, in Reels, I guess, but like different format in the sense of different way that the consumer engages. But you know, the core of it is still like they've very successfully rolled all that sort of stuff into like Instagram and, you know, so I guess the Meta ecosystem, such that as social media managers, it can be very hard to ever really think about leaving there, but also it can be impossible to keep up to date with what actually is going on.
I think you make a good point because you actually never know. I mean, Vine was the OG TikTok.
R.I.P. Vine.
And then, R.I.P. Vine. And TikTok probably got a lot of their ideas from Vine and just made it a better algorithm, a better experience than Vine. And Vine died off. So no other platform could compete until TikTok came around. And no other platform was competing with Instagram. But what TikTok did, which is now even actually better for social media managers for this day, is now you can, the younger competitors, is now you can compete with a relatively small following, where back in the day it was follower based campaigns. And if you didn't have a larger following, you weren't going to be seen in the algorithm. And now you have chances to go viral with 15 followers, which has changed the game a lot too for smaller brands and mid-scale brands.
Yeah, I think definitely, TikTok definitely really enabled that discovery side, and I think I put it actually as more that TikTok and TikTok I think has taken a lot more out of YouTube than it has anything else. I think that was the big fumble there, right? Was that TikTok, YouTube could have been the TikTok of sort of, I guess, the Western world. But successfully got that, like I call it the toilet scroll, like the TikToks are just that ideal time of being able to, burn that small amount of time. And then as YouTube videos seemingly became like sort of longer and longer and longer, and, you look at a lot of things like Mr. Beast content and things like that, that sort of seemingly has gotten longer and more complex every time. TikTok managed to get that perfect little piece of when you're just sitting on the toilet scrolling, it's just enough time. You don't have to get sort of stuck halfway through a video on, shipbuilding techniques from the Vikings or something that you'd see on YouTube. Instead, you can sort of go through and, again, as you said, that discovery algorithm was very successful. But it's that more passive. Certainly, if I look at most people that I know, TikTok is that much more passive environment. And also, I would say a lot fewer of the people I know have any desire to be creators on TikTok. It does seem like the sort of, Pareto thing of 80-20 is possibly even further of most people are very much passive consumers, whereas you have on things like Instagram and Facebook back in the day and Snap and whatever it might be, people are actually much more posting content, whereas TikTok is much more that passive consumption, a bit like you would see on YouTube. I think there was a stat from ages ago of I think 0.5% of people have ever commented on a YouTube video, because everyone just goes to watch videos. And I think TikTok's probably not that different.
So, I mean, knowing what we all know now, how should social media managers, brands, where should they focus? What should they be focusing on? Let's start there. Knowing that social it's changed a lot, but also the platforms, there's not many really new platforms in the last, besides TikTok in the last 10 years.
The thing that's coming for us all, obviously, is, AI, as he says, is a big sort of scepter, hanging over us. And I think, some of that is really this question of, well, what does that mean for, a social media manager? What does it mean for a marketer, right? And I was talking to a friend who, who's sort of an SEO world friend, and he was sort of saying, there's still conversations, what that means, it's coming for our jobs, but the other side, I think, is that really, what I think we're seeing and what I think is going to happen as brands, you can already start to see it in some places. There's some really good, Twitter/X accounts, of the AI slop that you get on, Facebook and stuff like that, of some of the just bizarre generated content that's clearly just, engagement farming and stuff like that. And I think you're sort of seeing this slow drive in some ways of a lot of those tools into just kind of generating more and more crap, and not good crap. And I think when I think about the sort of the role that a social media marketer or, marketing, I think broadly, same thing with blog content and everything else, right? Is I think having a sort of authentic and interesting brand and actually being able to do that in a way that's interesting and engaging is going to be really, really hard to do with AI. Creative concepts are really great with AI, but actually creative voice is quite awful a lot of the time with AI. And so I think, really being able to do that is I think, going to be where things go. It's very hard to say, like in terms of like, are we suddenly all going to be, like 2 years ago we said we'd all be in the metaverse, right? But that again has also been one of those trends that's just disappeared again. But I think, all of the usual things are going to keep happening, like the cost of paid is going to go up as it always does, crawls up over time. The value of organic perceived by your boss is going to go down as it always has. And I think, it's really going to be that piece of, as marketers, I think finding those unique voices and finding the ways to actually present those voices to the public is going to be the way to see cut through, whether it's, on email or social or any other channel. And that can be quite hard, it can be confronting for a lot of brands. But I think it also presents an opportunity, particularly for those, as you said, like a lot of those sort of smaller or more emerging brands. You have much more of an opportunity to not have that sort of big historic legacy of a bigger brand, or have, a whole lot of brand custodians who will yell at you about, taking a sort of Duolingo or Ryanair type approach to social, right? You couldn't see that happening with a lot of those sort of more legacy brands. But I think, developing that voice and thinking about what that voice is for you as a marketer and also for the brand or brands that you're, I guess, selling is going to be, I think, the really important thing. Because I think it's either that or we just have to give up.
I agree. I think AI is as good as what it knows in the past and what you feed it. And to make AI really good is you have to feed it your brand playbook. And if you don't have a brand playbook, it's just going to feed you what it's feeding that other social media manager who's asking the same question, like, what should I post, without like having a brand identity, brand voice, brand guidelines, guardrails all in place to make sure you're posting something else. And then also what humans have been good at for centuries is like creativity and adding like your creative spin, your creative juice to it, and knowing what's good and what's not. Because I've tested social and I mean AI for social, and it has some like decent like ideas. It could be good. It's good to brainstorm with. But if you try to make it right copy, even if you feed it your brand voice or come up with something that's like a hook for your audience or something, it falls super flat when it comes to that, which it could get better in a few years. But I want to go into the also question, like, knowing that like AI is going to get more and more used, but like, what are some of the ways that you thinking about equipping social teams with AI to like actually just help them with their job instead of thinking about all these other things you could do with AI for content creation as well?
Yeah, I mean, certainly for us, like, we use it a lot internally. Like we're a software company, right? So there's purely, we see a lot of the benefit. I have an agentic, AI thing that I can use for software development, for example. And again, sometimes the engineers will tell me it's generating absolute rubbish code, and other times it'll get something done that we thought was going to take weeks or months. So I think that for us and how we're seeing it, both within our space and I guess within our customers' lives, is really around, like sort of the first phase, I think, is going to be this whole efficiency gain piece. What if it will be suddenly a lot easier to have to, rather than having to learn CapCut or Premiere, like it used to be everyone had to learn Premiere, right? Now everyone at least has CapCut, which is a lot easier. But, I think we'll see sort of, I guess, the start being those efficiency gains, and I think some of the tools we've built, like we've built the sort of rephrasing stuff or the caption generation stuff, and those things are helpful, right? They're helpful to drive that efficiency side in a way that makes life a bit easier. But I don't think anytime soon we're going to see sort of, AI generated. And again, Google's, I say this, and then, Google's models just came out last week, early this week, with their new video generation, which is pretty cool and pretty good. But I still don't think it's quite the stage of where you'd expect brands to be getting on it. And so I think you're going to see a lot of that efficiency side in the next couple of years before we necessarily see the change. I think the more interesting thing, and I guess the more interesting trend, is really to ask, like, what is the role of that, personal connection? And in the way that, I guess, if you look at it on a purely consumer level, like people go to social to, engage with, friends and see what they're up to and, see funny pictures of cats and everything else. I always say, like, it's rare. It's a rare consumer that comes to social and says to themselves, I'm just desperate to engage with a brand today. And, like what does that mean in this world of, things like character AI and all of these sort of AI friends / girlfriends / boyfriend type solutions? And how does that change that sort of, I guess, true nature of human connection? And what does that mean for the way that, for a lot of what we've done in the past as social media marketers is go, oh, you've come here to, see what, your nephew looks like and, how his year 3rd birthday went. But here's some content from a brand. I hope you like it. It's kind of how we've treated this a lot of the time in the past. And what does that mean when they're actually going sort of straight to the source the whole time? And what do we do? And that's where I think it sort of is, you need to become the friend is what I would say. But in terms of AI tooling, I think it still is, we're still like on the start of that J curve, I think. It is definitely, you can see the places like, universities and things like that are obviously going to sort of, I guess, see the earliest disruptions and universities and schools in that it sort of changes a lot of what it is to write assignments. And, even I remember the days of where you were told, you couldn't use, you had to go to the Encyclopedia Britannica or, God, Wikipedia was this awful, you couldn't reference Wikipedia. And that's the same cycle, you can see happening now about, about school students using, AI tools to help them with, projects. And so I think it's going to be this really interesting element to see where things go. Like, I think it's actually a fun time to be in marketing. It's maybe a little bit controversial in saying that, but I think it's actually a really fun time to be in marketing because there are so many more tools you have available. And I think, there's a lot more things that you can experiment with. And I think there's a lot more license, I think, from the community to actually play than I think there was before. Maybe that was just also because it was COVID, right? No one wanted to play over COVID.
I mean, I always think about because my mom owned her own business but did marketing back in the day, and I always think back in the day she had to do fax machines and filing and all these manual tasks that took her so long, and then we got the computer and it automatically did that for us, but you still had to do all these manual tasks like inputting numbers and writing briefs and making sure that all these long decks and writing assignments. And now those things are going to get taken by AI. So there's always a next fade in, there's always going to be efficiency gains. But I always look at people are going to trust content less because AI, they might not tell the difference, but they'll start questioning content less. And what does that mean is they're just going to go back to human connection, which that's why you got to play the online, offline game and have both of how could I create social first experiences that using social media, but that is in real life as well. Having both those aspects is going to be super important now, which you wouldn't have said that. I mean, in COVID, it was only social and then before everybody had boring events and they didn't care about social media. Now social media is table stakes for most brands if you want to win, because you said earlier, rising CACs. It's going to get harder and harder to market. People have, before you could game the targeting game, targeting people. Now everybody has the tools to game the targeting. So you have to win on creative. You have to win. And the people who know creative best are the people who have been putting it out organically and fighting for views than the people who have been fighting for space and targeting. So I actually think that I see the convergence of paid and organic teams in the future, getting really close to each other and playing the game together. And those are the companies that are going to win, who those social and paid teams can play the game together. You see it a little bit with UGC right now, but I think there's going to be even more. Social is going to create content first, test it on organic, and then move it to the paid, and it's going to be this feedback loop.
A valid theory. I think the hard part I find is that a lot of the time, the content you see performing on paid is often, or has historically often been very different to the content you see perform on organic. But we'll see.
Yeah, I see that, but I think if you can get to the point where it doesn't even feel like an ad, and some of the ads, and that's what the organics will do, obviously. But I think the targeting has gotten so good, but now with that privacy stuff, everything's getting harder to get to the extreme targeting. So you see most people are broad targeting and using creative to target, which are like simple things that are going to work. But I think you got to have both those simple things that are working, that's just straight copywriting, and then the game of how like these storytelling and creative ads that worked in 50 years ago that these big agencies were doing.
Yeah, I was going to say we're back in the early 90s and things like that. Of it sort of is. It is true in that it's almost like I don't often watch. Probably a lot of people don't often watch like commercial television anymore, right? You're always watching Netflix or Prime or something like that instead. But the couple of times that I have, and it's for a football game or something like that, and you see the quality of the TV ads. And I remember when I was young, right, which wasn't that long ago, but like when I was young, it was the era of the big TV ad. And, you'd have that almost like Mad Men-esque thing of like, you'd go to your big agency and you'd get your big TV ad and be this like big creative process and everything else. And the TV ads now on the whole rubbish. They're terrible. Like there is no storytelling. There's no interesting things. There's none of that like the big production value that you would have from TV ads. And I think some of that is sort of drawn from social, but I think we're almost in some ways, I agree with you here in that I think we're going to kind of go full circle a little bit in that we're going to have to go back to those much more interesting and engaging ways of being able to draw the person in. And that was the whole point of a TV ad, right? Is, you've got to draw the attention in. And I think we're going to come back to that on social, because social's now kind of the only place you have left.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you started seeing serialized content becoming a thing on social. You're starting to see some people going back to the high production where everybody told you that iPhone cameras are working 3-4 years ago. Now it's like there's like a pendulum swinging of like these produced TV shows, even if it looks like it's on an iPhone camera, it's like produced skits. But I also think like it's a great time to be the marketer who came into marketing, who wanted to be the creative marketer, and now those are going to be more sought after. Because I remember like going to marketing 10 years ago, and if you weren't like a math person and you were pretty much not moving up the chain in marketing, unless you're at a different company. Like you got to know numbers. You have to know. Now the ideas are something that are going to be harder, and those creative minds are going to be somebody like people are going to ask them like, how do we stand out in front of these people? I can't game the system anymore, where you could game the system. I remember it was so easy to be good at finding targeting to the right person at the right time. That creative could have been average and you still were winning. Like you do the same thing as you did 5 years ago, that creative is not working because there's so much better creative out there now.
Yeah, it's almost like there was that period of where social was almost like running a hedge fund, right? It was all about, arbitrage and, all those kind of things. But yeah, I think a lot of that has, almost all of that margin has just disappeared off into the ether of, Meta or Google or, all of the other big ad platforms. And I imagine that also more and more people are probably bidding, to be fair. But, I think there's, yeah, as you said, like, I just think that creative piece is lost. And we've started, I think even the video with Johnny Ive and Sam Altman, again earlier this week of the OpenAI IO, announcement, and that was that really polished, beautiful video kind of piece, and seeing the community response to that, you sort of go, yeah, like that's what we don't see enough of anymore. We don't see that sort of higher production value from a brand, right? And that was, effectively for organic social, right? Because it was, product release. That didn't go to, a Good Morning America or, something like that. That was purely released, sort of direct, I guess, to the consumer online through social channels, and, had that really high storytelling. And, you expect nothing less of one of the world's most famous designers, but, it really had those elements to it. And I think that was the reason why it really sort of, I guess, touched that human element.
I think marketing always goes back to fundamentals, and sometimes people get lost in the fundamentals, but if you're good at the fundamentals, like you said, storytelling, copywriting, hooks, and like what makes, because that's also the piece of AI that is missing from some people that don't know what good looks like. I think you still have to learn what good looks like to produce good. So like you could put out something with a bad hook and you think it's great because it's written better than you would have written it, but it's you didn't study like those fundamentals of copywriting, psychology, storytelling, those elements, and how channels do storytelling, because video also changed the game for storytelling, because now you have to think about a big like surprise at the beginning and then text overlay and then all these pieces in the middle, and how do I keep the continuous loop, where some old school storytelling is like dragged out, get to the plot longer. It's like things are changing, but it's based on platform. It's still storytelling, but in a new way.
Yeah. And I think that, as you said, like it does all come back to, I think even, if I look at a lot of the brands, even that I just sort of, see around, right? A lot of the time, you look at it and you go, what's this content actually trying to say? And they've even lost that, like there's storytelling, there's all stuff, and sometimes it's just like, you've got to, like when some of my friends, and you go like, but what's this actually trying to, like, give me the 2 sentences this is trying to say. What are the 2 key messages? And they'll be like, oh. And a lot of those, sort of very basic core principles of just like being very clear in your mind about what it is you're trying to do and what you're trying to say and who you're trying to say it to and things like that. I think people often get distracted with a lot of the shiny things and forget that you've got to have that foundational layer. And if you don't, then you can have beautiful content or incredible content or whatever, all the best hooks or whatever, but it's never going to land.
What are some things you're seeing the best brands on your platform doing? What are some common threads on them?
Yeah, it's a good question. In my head, I sort of segmented it, like we're actually going through the process of hiring a new social media manager for us at the moment. And we had the debate internally of like, what does the right social media manager look like? I think the hard part is there's sort of, it's almost like there's 2 worlds. There's a world where you're, a social media manager or, digital marketing person, for a known brand, like, you might want to say legacy brand, but I say known brand, like they've got, and that usually means like more consumer oriented. They've got budget for out of home, like it's a known household type brand. And I think the nature of running, like look at our customers and the nature of the brands that are the FMCG, CPG, big multi, big franchises, things like that, global franchises. The nature of what they see successfully and how they see success is very, very different because they have that existing brand equity. And I think that's very different to a lot of the much more emerging but still, trying to be national brands, that actually, it's a very different style of marketing, and it is much more about trying to cut through and everything else as compared to sort of making sure you're in that consideration bucket at the last moment that you might have if you're running marketing for a big brand. As for what we see, people doing with our platform, I think, in the agency world, for example, we're, like we describe ourselves as having a fair price, right? And I think in agency world, you see a lot of agencies that have kind of run themselves to the bottom. Like, we're a big company, or I guess big company compared to what I've ever thought. But like, certain of our core tools, we spend a lot of money on, and when you sign that contract for that, HubSpot renewal, it's, $150,000 or something a year. You go, geez, God, that's a lot of money. But the other side of you goes, well, like this runs the whole core bit of my business. Like this is my CRM, this is my thing. And, I've got global customers and I've got to do all these things. And that's what the cost is. And so, one of the things we see a lot of the agencies, for example, that work with us is, they've always got that drive for efficiency. And you can try and do, social and even in our space, you can try and do it really, really cheaply. But you sort of end up with this cobbled together thing of like the Zapiers and the Google Sheets and everything else. And we probably see the best customers of ours are the ones that sort of lean into every tool or every platform has its own kind of, I guess, house view on how things should be done and how they, how you should collaborate as a team and, how that content production workflow should work and things like that. And I think the teams that we see best are the ones that sort of lean into that. The in-house teams, I find, generally speaking, will actually, take the time and effort to really think about it. The agencies, I think, I find sometimes can be a bit more resistant to doing any change management associated with any sort of tool. But the ones who really lean into it, I think, see the efficiency gains. Like ultimately, that's a bit much like CRM and marketing automation and things like that. Like, our tool space is we sell efficiency. We sell better reporting, we sell easier reporting, we sell, the ability to collaborate across the team more easily, all that kind of thing. And so I think the efficiency side is where you see the real difference. But I think in terms of the actual content that performs, there's just it's almost a chasm between these bigger sort of householdy brands and the other brands, and the smaller ones that are doing really, really well, I think, are the ones that really have developed that voice.
Yeah, I like that you keep going back to like the voice, the story. A lot of people forget when they starting in social. Like, do you have that? And and also how is it evolving? And what is the different voices for channels if you're trying to? Because different channels, you kind of have to tweak the voice a little bit because you can't play. You have to play the game on the field. You can't just play your game. So I think the best teams have a playbook for each channel, but it all comes back to like their values, like how we want to show up, that voice. I totally agree. The smaller brands just have more risk tolerance than the other brands and could do more things than the other brand, which is kind of cool to see.
It's fun. If it was me working for someone in house, like, I'd want to work for a smaller collection of brands because it's so much more fun. Like, you get to do all the interesting things, and you get to experiment with new activations. And, as you were saying, like, that online, offline events and things like that. Like, you want to have enough budget for activations and things like that, but you also don't want to have so much that, you sort of get stuck in that sort of legacy brand mode.
And yeah, I do think that the thing you said about efficiency, it's at some point you lose scale when you're trying to scale. At some point it breaks. And if you don't set up what I learned in marketing operations for a long time is you can only duct tape for so long until you have to go back and rebuild. So it's better to just start the processes now and then not have to rebuild later and document the processes earlier. The duct taping, it's hard because only one person knows it. If you get that person fires or quits, you're going to have to redo the whole process again. And then you're lost 3 or 4 months. And just becomes like, and especially if you're growing fast, like you don't want to think about that in a moment where you're scaling and now have to like go back and redo everything to make sure that, and eventually a marketing leader will come in and be that marketing leader who says, we need process when you get to a certain point. So do it earlier.
Yeah, it is a sad point. I'll admit, like I'm certainly the 0 to 1, like the chaos. Chaos is my favorite kind of, I guess, environment to work in. But, having also done some time, building, scaling brands and in the venture funded world and things like that, like you do definitely see what happens when the wheels fall off. And so you sort of have to have a bit of a developed sense of when to just accept the duct tape solution to, get the MVP out, get the first version out. You don't want to sort of be stuck so long in analysis paralysis. But then you've also got to have that sixth sense of, when it's time to start, layering in all the boring things or all the things I think are boring, but, all of the process documentation and all those kind of things. Eventually you've got to start layering them in, and it's sort of, it's a tricky sixth sense, I think, as a manager or, as an owner, to work out the right timeline for those things to come in. And, even, I often debate with other startup people, the question of how much do you hire ahead, like in marketing context, when do you hire the CMO that's, you probably need in 2 years? Do you hire them today, or do you, sort of wait 2 years and try and stretch someone up instead? No right answer to it, but it's always a tricky balance.
If I would go back and like run marketing ops again, I think this is probably like one of the best eras to be in that job, just because you have AI where like all that annoying stuff you could just do like basically tell AI what you're doing as you're doing it, and they can make it into a nicer doc for you, and then you can go edit it. Where before you had to be like typing up your whole doc and having to, it's like that was my worst part. I'm a chaos marketer too. I thrive in chaos. I would say like I love startups more than I love going to big brands because the process kills me. But I do understand that you also got to know what type of marketer you are. Lastly, I wanted to ask you, what is a marketing hill you would die on?
Ooh, tricky question. Probably a hill I would die on is, I think a lot of people who go into marketing should never have gone into marketing. I think you've got a lot of marketers that end up stuck in the profession, and they're the ones that produce a lot of crap because they don't like their job. Should be fun.
I like that.
We have good days and bad. Everyone's got good days and bad days and things like that. But like, I find often talking to people in marketing, even juniors, right? And juniors, I'm like, what a great time to change career. But I find a lot of people talking marketing, you're like, you don't actually enjoy this work. And that's a bad place to be.
That is controversial, but I think that's also just like learning life's like, yeah. So I think you're so right. There's a lot of people who just I started here. I don't want to change job. I'm stuck. I just want to come clock in, clock out. And that sucks to be that marketer, or you've chosen. It just
brings the quality of the profession down.
Yeah. I mean, I always say to people, like, marketing is one of the professions where you just see all the, like, you only people remember like the bad all the time. Because like you hear about the scammy marketers, you hear about the people manipulating you, and all the good marketing kind of is not seen because it's working on you, and you're not going to complain if it's working on you. You're going to notice like those terrible ads, those bad targeting, those spammy emails, and you're just gonna. But you don't think about all like the great marketers out there putting out things that is working, and you're not noticing. And that's hard about marketing, is like the great marketers are the ones that are doing things that you don't know they're doing.
The best puppet masters.
Yeah, it's funny, but it's true. It's hard to, like, the best marketers are making ads that are clicking that you don't know that worked on you, or brand moments that you don't know, like they created brands that you don't know that you're buying because they've created this great brand. So it's cool, but it's also, like you said, those bad marketers bring down the profession for marketing.
Yep.
Lastly, where can people find you and everything you're doing?
I mean, you can find Sked anywhere at Get Sked Social, SKED Social. You can find me personally. I'm an X person. I'm a Twitter person. So it's pretty much my only social channel these days. It's just injected into my veins. So there, LinkedIn. But yeah, no, come and chat. Come and see what we do.
Ooh, an X person. I was on X. I still on X. I'm not, like, more of a lurker now. I don't
post as much as I used to. I agree. I don't post as much as I used to.
It's gone through like a renaissance the last few. Like, it's gone from. I remember, like, I think it was probably early days where someone texted me like, "This is like someone who was like 5 to 6 or like 10 years older than me said, this new platform on Twitter, it's great for brands. Brands post all these things on there, and that's be great." And now it's like this hugely conversational news outlet that it's crazy now. It's a good platform to be a lurker.
It is a good platform. It's very much a melting pot.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. Keep tuning in to hear more great insights from the coolest marketers from around the world. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and follow the Marketing Millennials podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, I would greatly appreciate you giving us a 5-star rating. It helps bring more marketers into our community.